Global South and Ukrainian reality, do these things correlate? Olympics and neutral Russian terrorism, IOC struggling to compile it. Orban strikes a pro-Russian pose. Again, what does it mean for Hungary and its relationship with EU? These topics in more detail with me, Henry Keane, on UATV English, as usually bringing hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. There is an organization in Ukraine, Ukrainian Center for Disinformation Monitoring. What it does, obviously, it monitors the international media space and identifies the narratives that are directly or not beneficial to the Kremlin, and counters the dissemination of said narratives, of course. So today let us look at some major media plays in the global South media realm amidst Russian aggression against Ukraine. India. The main topic for the Indian media in recent days was, of course, the discussion of the upcoming visit of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Ukraine. A lot of articles and videos note that the visit should calm the, to put it mildly, very irritated the US and Europe politicians who were quite confused by Modi's recent visit to Moscow. Some media note that thanks to Prime Minister Modi's visit to Putin, India has, I quote, protected its relations with Russia. Also, Indian media tells the story of successful attack of Ukrainian drones on Russia and how after that attack Putin strengthened the defense of his own palace. Yeah, well, of course he did. Who is the guarantor of Russian future and prosperity and safety and culture and whatever you name it? Of course, him, the only, the one, the first, and I hope the last, Vladimir Putin. Every Russian knows that while Putin's palace is safe, Russia is safe. Sort of, as Ukrainian drones has clearly shown. Another topic comes from India and Pakistani media. There, a lot is being written about the fate of 22-year-old boy Ravi Moon from Haryana, who died on the front line in Ukraine after he was, I quote the sources, forced to fight against Ukrainian forces. Is it sad that the 22-year-old Indian met his death in Ukraine? Well, of course it is. It is a tragedy. What should be done about it, ask the Indian media, and the war must be stopped on whatever terms as soon as possible, answers the media to itself. Now, Malaysia. There are command of Ukrainian diver Oleksiy Sereda about the difficulties of the training in the conditions of Russian shelling and blackouts was shared wildly. What should be done, asked the media again, so the answer again is the war stopped on whatever terms as soon as possible, again is the answer. See what I mean? I can already read behind these lines of Indian, Pakistani and Malaysian media in Russian language. I can already see the Kremlin propaganda narratives almost in every article there about Ukraine. I can feel the global South media pushes me towards the narrative that sounds like, paraphrasing Henry Ford, stop the war on whatever terms, if only these terms are Russian. Well, here are some hard truth in easy terms, Ukrainian terms on main global South media topics I just mentioned. About Ravi Moon, that 22-year-old boy that died in Ukraine. Well, we in Ukraine would know all about it, as 22-year-old boys and girls, both military and civilians, die in Ukraine every day murdered by Russian occupiers. A war must be stopped, sure thing. And this war must end not on whatever terms, but solely on the terms of just and lasting peace, so no 22-year-old boys and girls have to die anymore. On that Ukrainian diver having difficulties, article in Malaysian media. Really? A diving training difficulties amidst a full-scale invasion? What about a whole district burnt out to ashes? What about the families perished in the fire under Russian shelling? What about parents whose children were abducted and sent to Russia? Why Malaysian media does not talk about that and just shares a comment of a diver in distress instead? And finally, on that, Mr. Modi's visit to Moscow and some Indian media calling it a protection of Indian interests. Well, I can even agree to that, by the way. A visit of Modi protects Indian relations with the Kremlin indeed. Right until the moment Putin decides he doesn't care. Ukraine can give Mr. Modi and Indian media, just by the way, a physical, concrete, solid, signed, legal, and in all possible ways legit international proof of at least 10 international agreements with Russia that's supposed to protect Ukrainian relations with it. We thought it would. And the world also thought that way. Until one day we all find out it just is not the case. And one day Mr. Modi might also find it out in a hard way. So don't get me wrong, I'm far from thinking that after Mr. Modi's visit to Ukraine, he will return home and he will somehow see the light and then helps Ukraine to counter those global South media covertly disseminating Russian false narratives. No. This is exactly why we have our own Ukrainian Center for Countering Russian Lies. And we at UATV English kindly encourage Mr. Modi to use it until things did not went globally south for him. What if Osama bin Laden was a great athlete and would come to an Olympics to participate in competition? Would IOC say it's outrageous and unthinkable, or it would have think about it and then would accept the international terrorists under the neutral flag and promote the whole thing as a gesture of goodwill, reason and peace? In easy terms, neutral flag is an oxymoron that has been abused by Olympic gods of sports in their high chairs up there in financial skies who were confused and just did not know what to do with Russians. They have always been saying sports above politics, and now they clearly showed with their own behavior it is far from being the case. Sports was always used and abused as a political and propaganda tool. Always. That is a bad fact proved by IOC. As if the IOC decisions would have been stopped Russian bin Ladens from hiding behind neutrality, then IOC would have clearly shown all of us, yes, sports is above politics and warmongering. Then IOC would have clearly shown us its zero tolerance to terrorism, but IOC has chosen otherwise. They have chosen a neutrality. I could be giving you hours-long videos of Ukrainian politicians explaining the world why such a neutrality is nothing but a fake. But hey, here it is in easy terms. Any flag, it's just a colors, arranged in a unique way. So any flag is a flag, even the neutral one, until blood is spilled over its colors. So IOC's decision never covered anything. On the contrary, it only revealed things as ugly as they are, just as blood is better seen on those white neutral flags that Russian athletes are holding, it made Russian terrorism to be seen better on the backdrop of IOC's neutrality to terrorism instead of a zero tolerance to it. To Orban or not to Orban? Well, tonight UATV English talks to someone who may have an answer to this very controversial question: Hungary in Europe, what's next and how? This someone is not only an associate professor of history at the University of Florence in Italy, but is an author who wrote Viktor Orban's biography. So I enjoyed the conversation very much. Hope you will do too. Interview on UATV English. Well, let us talk to someone who can answer the questions. I hope so very much. Stefano Bottoni, Associate Professor of History at the University of Florence, Italy, the author of political biography of Viktor Orban. Stefano, hello.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
Well, it is my pleasure. I have a lot of questions. So, for our first question, dear Professor, is Orban pro-Putin or he simply is pro-Orban? What do you think?
Not an easy question to start with, but I think that words and gestures have some importance in our world. So when Orban makes pro-Putin or pro-Russian statements and carries out a pro-Russian politics in many respects, I think that we have to assume that he carries out a pro-Russian politics and not only a pro-Hungarian or pro-Orban politics. So I think that something definitely changed in the relationship between Orban and his party and Russia and Putin roughly 15 years ago. We will discuss probably the personal history of Orban. He was not a pro-Russian politician back in the 1990s or the early 2000s. Something changed in the way he perceived Russia as a regional partner, as a regional power around 2009, 2010. And I think even more decisively after or with the annexation of Crimea in 2014. So after the Maidan. So after the Maidan, we can see a definitive shift in the Hungarian foreign policy from a policy of balance between pro-Western and pro-Russian or pro-autocracy forces, and a next stage, which we are living now in the last 10 years, of a unilaterally pro-Russian, pro-Chinese, or pro-autocracy, pro-illiberal stance in foreign policy as well.
So did you ever meet Orban in person, Professor?
We know now that they met first time for a couple of minutes only in 2006, when Orban was not in power. At that time, we have to know that the very complex file of the relationship of Hungary, which is a small country with little strategic importance, very little army, no access to the sea, and Russia and the post-Soviet world, this file was basically in the hands of the post-communist political forces, the socialists. They had the network, they had the connections, they had the past, they had people who studied in Moscow or Kiev or Leningrad back in the 1960s, 70s, or 80s. They knew everyone in the region.
Right.
Fidesz, the party of Viktor Orban, first of all, they were opposition guys, young leaders in the late 1980s. Second, none of them had studied in Moscow, or none of them was proficient in Russian. For example, they were much more proficient in English or French or German, other foreign or Western languages. And third, all of them, as the Hungarian right wing in general, came from a cultural tradition, just like in the case of Poland. If you are a so-called good Polish or Hungarian patriot in the 20th century, you are usually anti-Russian and or anti-Soviet. So you come from a certain cultural tradition because the coexistence with Russia or the Soviet Union was not so peaceful, as we all know. So you come with a mental setting, and the mental setting of Orban was very, very far from the mental setting of those who accepted the reality that the Soviet Union is a big brother, or we have to have a special relationship with Russia. For Orban, it was just a very pragmatic stuff that, okay, Moscow is a post-imperial center, we get gas and fuel from Russia, and that's it. So he never visited Moscow, as far as we know, before 2010. The first political meeting with Putin, the meeting which is really recorded, and I think that that meeting had some historical importance, happened in St. Petersburg in November 2009, when Orban was at that time the chief of the Hungarian opposition. So he was not prime minister. He was the chief of the Hungarian opposition party. Fidesz was invited to the party congress of United Russia to be held in St. Petersburg. On that occasion, he was granted a half an hour face-to-face meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. We don't know what happened during that meeting. We only know that immediately after winning the 2010 election, it was a landslide victory in April 2010 for Viktor Orban. His party got 2/3 of seats in the new Hungarian parliament. Immediately after that landslide victory, two Hungarian oligarchs very close to Viktor Orban went secretly to Moscow. They were immediately taken to Lubyanka, so to the headquarters of the Russian secret services, and they told later, one of them told later journalists, Lajos Simichko, he was the treasurer of the party for many, many years. Simichko told in detail the story, and he told that they were received by high-grade Russian security officers who started to set up with them the priorities and the way for a new pragmatic economic and political cooperation between Hungary and Russia, which means that Orban already recognized Russia as a potential partner. So the shift in the way Orban perceived Russia as a superpower can be placed between 2009 and 2010. So everything we see after 2010 is the consequence of this seminal choice.
Right. Well, thank you very much for this beautiful, detailed, and very interesting answer. Well, did you ever meet Viktor Orban in person?
Not closer than 10 or 15 meters. So I was never close to him. I told it in my book and in many interviews.
Right.
As an observer, I was not politically far from him for many years. So I consider him a very talented politician. And I think that he might have become a very good, strong political leader for the Hungarian democracy after Hungary got into the EU. So what happened to not only to him, but to the Hungarian democracy as a whole was a very painful fact for me as a former, if not supporter, but a kind of empathic sympathizer of Viktor Orban. So I think that he not only betrayed many people who were liberal, conservative, or moderate-minded, like myself, but he also betrayed the Hungarian democracy. Basically, he destroyed it from within.
Right.
And on the top of this, he attracted the support of I'm not sure if waste, but of a majority of Hungarians who actively participated in the killing of this democracy, post-communist democracy, or witnessed it without acting, which is, at the end of the day, it is basically the same thing, unfortunately. So if you don't defend your democracy, if you let democracy die, democracy dies, whether you're personally responsible for this or not, at the end of the day, is irrelevant. So you participated in the process. So what happened in Hungary since 2010 was the slow and now not so slow killing of the post-communist democracy, which was flawed, was imperfect, had many problems.
But existed.
And the most serious thing as an analyst is that after 2010, very few Hungarian people felt the necessity of defending that democracy. It also means that most of the Hungarian society probably never interiorized what a democracy means. What does it mean living in a democracy? Which are your tasks, your duties as a citizen? And one of the duties as a citizen is to protect not only your country physically, of course, as we can see now in the case of Ukraine, that can become a very important task, a vital task to survive. But another vital task to survive as a democratic community is to fight the internal enemies of democracy. When a political force, when a prime minister tries to kill your democracy, you act. And basically no one acted. We let it happen. And I think that I wrote my books and I became a little bit more engaged in the Hungarian public arena to raise awareness in my own public, in my own community about this fact.
Unbelievable, Professor. You answered all of my questions that I wanted to ask. This is a beautiful conversation. The only question is more like, more like personal for me, if you allow me. If we walk in the shoes of Ukrainian diplomacy, do you think it is better if Ukraine oppose Viktor Orban or try to win him back, if this is possible, to become a reason, to find a reason to make Orban more pro-Ukrainian, or maybe even Ukrainian friend? Because if the shift possible, then maybe the anti-shift is also possible, if you allow me to ask this question.
Another tough question, to be honest.
Sorry.
In these days, we hear a lot about the fuel question. So the oil import from Russia to through Ukraine, and we hear so different voices. So I'm not an energy policy expert. So I can just hear from the Hungarian side that Ukraine might have stopped the transit. The Ukrainian side denies these allegations, saying that nothing of this happens. Hungary immediately threatened not only Ukraine, our retaliation, but also those EU countries who are supplying weapons to Ukraine. So they, as you know, they anticipated the money, and now they want their money back. So countries like Slovakia, Czech Republic. So all of these countries are now threatened with the freezing of these funds to Ukraine, but also to those countries who anticipated the money to purchase weapons for the Ukrainian army. So this is a very complicated diplomatic game, and the Hungarian opposition itself is very split up, is very divided on the question you mentioned, whether you can be more effective against Orban if you try to win him back to the Western camp. This can be one position. So in this case, you try to appease him. You try to
buy him,
de-radicalize his deviation from liberal democracy. On the other side, there is another possibility which can be contemplated not only theoretically. What if his deviation from the democratic standards is not a root incident, but is part of a larger strategy? So you can't really de-radicalize him. And the only alternative you have is to fight him. Fight him economically, diplomatically, politically, culturally, which also means that if you have to hit him,
you have to hit.
You can hit him. And of course, by hitting him, for example, through sanctions, this is a very delicate topic. But if you hit him through sanctions, you also hit the Hungarian people and the Hungarian society.
Well, that's what I mean.
If there is fuel shortage in Hungary, people will not only pay more for fuel, but they will feel in despair, they will metaphorically suffer, and so on and so forth. So it is a kind of collective punishment.
Yeah, it is a kind of a collective punishment. Absolutely, Professor.
Yes. So this is the point. And
exactly.
I'm also very unsure about the question. I think that this is the question politicians and diplomats should ask themselves over the last month, because we have seen how far Orban and his government can go.
Here we go.
Not only in the Russian politics as such, but in the bullying and destroying the unity and the cohesion of the European Union from within.
Right.
If they want to stop him or to contain him, they have to find a path, maybe also combining the two methods. Exactly. I have no idea how, but basically this is the question they have to address.
Exactly. Thank you so very much, Professor. It was a lovely conversation. I've actually feel myself that you answered the questions that I never even actually had. So I would like to thank Professor Stefano Bottoni, Associate Professor of History at the University of Florence, Italy, the author of the book about Viktor Orban. And you stay tuned, guys, and seek for more on our channel. Well, that was it. Thanks so much for being with us. Please like, share and comment. Your voice matters indeed, as it in turn helps Ukrainian voice to be heard worldwide. More to come next week with UATV English and the team, bringing you hard truth in easy terms as usual directly from Ukraine. Stay tuned and goodbye.